So I want to talk today about the reading from James, and start by letting you know that it's a bit tricky, this reading from James, because there are 5 Jameses mentioned in the New Testament, and we're not really sure which James it was who wrote this. So today I'm going to pick out 2 of the Jameses out of the 5, and I want to talk about 2 Jameses. 2 Jameses. And for simplicity and convenience, the 2 Jameses I'm talking about are traditionally and historically known as James the Greater and James the Lesser. Stick with me. James the Greater and James the Lesser. And the suggestion is that it was James the Lesser who wrote this book in the Bible, this letter that we have. It gets very confusing because James the Greater is generally associated with James the son of Zebedee. Remember Peter, James and John who followed Jesus everywhere? That's James the Greater. We'll get to him in a while. James the Lesser, that's a bit less clear. There's one James who's mentioned called James the son of Alphaeus amongst Jesus' disciples. Another one is called James the Just. Another one talks of being James the brother of Jesus. It's a bit unclear. But we're sticking with James the Lesser, James the son of Alphaeus. Could be a mixture or an amalgam of these, we're not quite sure. But even as Margie introduced the reading, it suggested that many believe this was written by James, the brother of Jesus. Now, the brother of Jesus might not be same mother, same father, brother. It might be same mother, different father. It might be, various combinations. But James, the brother of Jesus, whatever. I like the idea that James, the brother of Jesus, has seen Jesus grow up, or grown up with Jesus, but has still become a follower of Jesus. You know, this is the little kid you used to play with. Your little brother who was annoying, or maybe your big brother who was annoying, I don't know. But he stole your marbles and beat you at things and stuff like that when you were playing games. And there's passages in Scripture where it reports that Jesus didn't spend a lot of time with his family. He kind of ignored them when they hung around. But James becomes a leader in the church. What we do know is that he was a strict Jew. We also know that he was martyred around 62 AD. So we get a picture of James. It could be an amalgam sort of picture, but let's stick with it. This is not James, son of Zebedee. We're getting to him later. James writes this book. It's not clear who he even writes it to. It's not written to the Galatians or the Ephesians or the Romans like we are familiar with some of the other letters. And so this is one of what scholars call the Catholic epistles, the letters that are written in general. The Catholic epistles, like 1st and 2nd Peter, the books of John, and the book of Jude. The Catholic epistles, not written to a particular audience, but general instruction. And James is also interesting as a book in the Bible because it doesn't contain a lot of references to Jesus Christ. Only a couple of times in the first verse and in the beginning of the 2nd chapter. So Luther is famously reported as saying that of all the books in the Bible, James was an epistle of straw. I've never really completely understood what that means, but I got the picture that Luther didn't think much of this book. Because it didn't say enough about Jesus or about what Jesus has done for our salvation, in Luther's opinion. But it does say a whole bunch of interesting things. And I'm talking now to you people who were baptised this morning. Oh yeah, you're not there anymore. Never mind. Just save this up for another day. It says, do not be deceived. That's how he starts the passage that we heard today. Do not be deceived. And yet I find, as I look around, that we get deceived on a daily basis. Deception is everywhere. Spin, ideology, different versions of the truth, an absence of truth. This week, I got one of those messages that nobody wants to get from your bank that says, suspicious activity recorded on your credit card. Your credit card has been blocked. Please call this number. I call the number and they tell me that one of the places that I'm trying to buy something from is a dodgy brothers organisation, and they've blocked it, and this is what I have to do to unblock it. And I think, it seems so believable, that ad. It was going to make me skinny. And I thought, that looks great, I want that. But alas, they told me it was not true. And my money is now safe. Don't be deceived. How easily we all are deceived. Second thing James says is, God's gifts are made perfect. Made perfect. They're not just, God's gifts aren't just good. God's gifts are perfect, mature, complete. The fullness of what is needed. Imagine that. You who are baptized today, God wants to give you what is perfect. James says, God is unchanging. Other ancient gods were capricious, but we declare a faith in a God who is trustworthy, consistent, reliable, steady. Then James says one of the really coolest things around. Be quick to hear and slow to anger. Get it? Quick to hear, slow to anger. Everybody here is like that, right? Everybody here is like that? 2 ears open all the time, slow to anger. I'm not going to risk it by picking on anybody, but I just want to check. Are we a slow to anger people? Right, okay. No, some of us tend to be just the opposite. Slow to hear and quick to anger. That sounds more like the pattern we follow. James says in verse 21, rid yourselves or put aside. It's the same word. Put aside, and then he lists all those things that we shouldn't get involved in. Fornication, idolatry, adultery, theft, bunch of things. It's actually the same word that was used for changing your clothes when you come to get baptized. You people who were baptized today, you'll want to know that. It was like, put off your old clothes and put the new white robes on of God's baptized, chosen people. And then he says, be doers of the word. Become, in fact he says, become doers of the word. It's meant to be a lifelong process. It's not just, we'll do that, but it's something that you do and something you become a doer of. Be doers of the word. Be people who do God's will. That's James the Lesser. And it's a good book. I don't know what Luther's problem was. It is a good book. I like James, and it's very preachable. It's very, someone says it's like New Testament wisdom literature, like Proverbs or Ecclesiastes or something like that. A lot of good stuff in there. The other James, James the Greater, he was killed by Herod in 44 AD, James, son of Zebedee, and he died in Jerusalem. But then a curious thing happened, because, and you need to go and read the legends of how this happened, he died in Jerusalem, but a couple of centuries later he finished up in Spain. And James is now the patron saint of of Spain. And in fact, there's even a legend in Spain of James as a person who was there to help drive the Moors out of Spain. There was the time when the Moors were driven out of Spain. If you go there, you can still see some architecture from that period and so on. But, so James is sometimes referred to as James the Moor Slayer, Saint Santiago Matamoros, James the Moor Slayer. Kind of scary. Anyway, the thing is, and I'm not going to give you the whole story, but the story goes that James' relics, James' bones, were found in a stone boat that had miraculously sailed from Jerusalem and been deposited on the shores near Spain. And the bones were reverently taken and put into this place that is called Santiago de Compostela, and kept now in a special vault in the cathedral in Santiago de Compostela. And what happened then was, everybody wanted, if that was such a miraculous story, that in the Middle Ages everybody wanted to go and get a blessing from those bones, which were now in Santiago. So all across Europe began to be developed pilgrimage routes to get to Santiago de Compostela, which is on the westernmost promontory of Spain. And there are routes that begin in Trondheim in Norway, far to the north. There are routes that begin in France, and you can go through France. I have even seen in the south of England pilgrim routes that begin probably around Canterbury or something like that, which was another great pilgrimage route, but were heading off to get you to Santiago so you could be in the presence of St. James. It became one of the things that people did because you wanted to go and get a blessing of being able to be with those relics. And if you couldn't do it, you paid your mate to go and do it. Do it for me and we'll share the blessing. And what happened was, it could lead to, forgiveness of sins and so on. The practice is called Indulgences, part of what the Reformation was all about. But it sprung up and it spawned a whole network of roads throughout Europe. Some time ago, they renovated this pilgrimage idea and this thing throughout Europe, and we now talk about the Camino De Santiago. Have you heard of this? The Camino De Santiago? You know someone who's walked a bit of it or done a bit of it? Well, Catalina and I did it in 2004. We started in France. We did the French way, which is across the top, across a few mountain ranges, and we did it on bicycles. On bicycles, you say? That's not being a pilgrim. Aha, but I'm pleased to tell you that it is. The rules say that you can go on foot, you can go on bike, you can go on a horse or donkey. And if you're going on foot, then you have to complete the last at least 100 kilometres of the journey by foot. If you're on a bike, you have to complete the last 200 kilometres on your bike. And if you're going by a donkey, you're probably lucky if you even make it. But that's the rules. So we went on bike. So I brought a visual aid, a bike. Because, as you'll realise, you people who've just been baptised this morning, the Christian life is a bit of a pilgrimage or a bit of a journey. So here's my bike. This is not the bike that I went to, but it is an impressive bike that would be good for doing a long journey. And you can see that it's loaded up. I've got bags and lights and computers, and I've got a trailer, and I've got 7 water bottles on there. I'm ready to go across the Tanami Desert. This is going to be great. If you're a pilgrim, do you reckon this would be a good bike for a pilgrimage? What do you think? Mary, you don't think so? Why not? Sorry? True. Things can go wrong. There are some spares. I have got some spares, and I did fill the bags up. If you saw this all completely loaded up, the bags full, it would be a truly scary kind of a thing, and very heavy, trust me. No, I think pilgrims are meant to travel light. That's basically the story. When we did our pilgrimage to Santiago, we did have a bike each, but we had less gear than this. This is just me getting silly now and not wanting to travel light. Catalina would throw half of this away and then she'd travel light, or she'd make me carry it. When you're travelling as a pilgrim on the Camino de Santiago, what you get is like a little passport, pilgrim's record, and as you go along and stop in different places, it gets a stamp in it to show that you've been there. That's how you can prove when you get to the final end. Oh, Ross, give us some images of the Camino. That's the final spot, and you can see people on their bikes. You can see people walking down the Camino. There they are, walking. Who'd walk when you've got a bike? And there they are going into the cathedral. Yes, some of them carry crosses, some of them go in groups. It's a very European holiday kind of thing as well. It's a cultural route, UNESCO route. That's the cathedral that you're trying to get to. There they are. Someone's gone with a dog, that's good. Those pilgrims look pretty happy. Carrying a staff is one of the signs that you're a pilgrim. And I don't know if we'll see it in any of these images, but is that the last one, Ross? Okay. So in some of them you'll see a scallop shell. That's the symbol of St. James. Okay, so we need a passport. We keep a record of our journey. As we travel, we record where we've been. Don't we all like sharing stories of where we've been and who we've seen and what we've done along the way? That's part of what we do in Christian life as well. And we journey together. That's the interesting thing about those pictures. People are in groups or pairs. There's people travelling alone, but you don't stay alone. You'll find companions on the journey. And it's good to have companions because things can go wrong and you can share the joys and the sorrows. When we were travelling on our bikes, Catalina came down a hill and stacked the bike big time. Just looked down or looked up at the wrong time and finished up in the gravel on the side of the road and over she went. Now her version of the story is that Andrew came running over and was concerned only about the bicycle. My version of the story is Andrew came running over, was concerned that the bicycle and the wife were in the middle of the road and I'd better pick up the bike and move that and then anyway, whatever the story was, the bike was pretty mangled. And for a while we're thinking, okay, we're a fair way from the next place that we have to get to. How will we get there? Some guys came along in a van. They were a bunch of cyclists. Oh, we've got a spare bike. Give us your bike, we'll chuck it in the van. You take this bike, you can keep going. And we'll see you at the next place. Off they drove. My name's Jose, by the way. Off they went. And we thought, what if we never find them again? We've just given away our bike. And then after a while, Catalina said, hey, this bike's pretty good. I don't mind this bike. Doesn't matter if we don't find them. But we did find them, and we sort of bumped into them the rest of the way along the way. Jose became a good friend. He came and stayed with us when we were living in the UK. It was great. You meet people on the journey. So, that's why our church, when we baptise people, we promise to surround you with love and care. And we're not going to leave you alone. We're going to be your companions on this journey. There are signposts along the way. All along this journey, you get this little scallop shell sign, which kind of points the way. It lets you know you're on the right track. You saw it in one of those earlier images. That's the sign of St. James, and that's what you kind of follow down the 800 and something kilometres of journey that we did, so you don't lose your way. Yes, in our Christian life there will be some signposts for us as well, so that we can follow and not lose our way. But then you're trying to get to this destination, this cathedral. this place where the bones of St. James are buried. Because if you make it, you know that you're going to be able to see this relic and you're going to get your sins forgiven. And in this cathedral, I just have to give you a little burst of this, is the most amazing thing you've ever seen. I've never seen anything like it anywhere else in the world. It's supposed to be the biggest censer thurible in the world. And let's just watch a little bit of video of this in case you've never seen this. This is called the Botafumeiro in Spanish.